Kate, what do you make of how the potential Democratic field is grappling with what we're seeing in Iran right now?
Well, I think for the most part, they see a huge opportunity to continue to make arguments against Trump, but to do it in a way, I think the way Newsom was just doing it there, to do it in a way that ties back to what he would define as Trump's failures, hurting people in their day-to-day lives. That argument about $200 billion can fund, this much in Obamacare subsidies, and you can go down the line, can fund schools in your district, can fund, food programs. I mean, that's a very tangible argument that I think will have legs. It's interesting to watch. So you see, Pritzker and Newsom both pursuing. I mean, Newsom's been very aggressively anti-Trump for a year and a half here, but for Pritzker to really take a pretty lefty kind of resistance-coded line of attack against Trump. I mean, I think he's trying to burnish his credentials on the left. I am somebody who's dubious that in a big sprawling 2028 primary, I actually think this question of electability is going to come to the fore more than it is right now. And I think this kind of, if you elect me, I'm going to exact my revenge on Trump officials. I actually don't think that that's going to wind up being a persuasive argument in the Democratic Party, but we will debate and discuss that for many months to come.
We're looking for the same things. I'm watching them go as far hardcore left as they possibly can and thinking, well, we'll just use this. We'll use this in the general election of 28. My Republican Party will use this and beat him back. This is what happened in the Joe Biden primary. And everybody went to the far left on social issues. It came back to haunt Kamala Harris. This is the time frame that John Kerry said, I voted for the Iraq War before I voted against it. These things will come back to them against the American people. And the American people are all about killing the bad guy on a bipartisan basis. That is a winning message, and being on the far left and extreme right now is not.
And I think people want to see, I think for the most part, voters who are going to vote in the Democratic primary, of course, there's a slice of the far left base that wants to exact as much revenge as possible. And there's certainly energy in the Democratic base for a vocally anti-Trump message. But I think the successful message is going to sound a lot more like Gavin Newsom just did right there, holding Trump accountable for the things that have had impact on people's lives, not holding Trump accountable because we feel like he has wronged the Democratic Party, or even some of these constitutional arguments, which I know makes people really, riles.
Animates the base.
It animates the base. It riles people up. But you got to win a general election, and I think making an argument that's just tied to what's going on in people's lives is going to feel a lot more immediate.
Yeah, Tulu, let's watch another one of these potential candidates, Pete Buttigieg, who doesn't currently hold elected office, but has been traveling the country and campaigning and also talking about this. Watch.
What I'm worried about is not the soldiers and the people who are serving. What I'm worried about is their political leadership, like Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump. We lived through a war that was sold to us on false pretenses when I was younger. This war has not been sold on any pretense. The president just went ahead and did it.
What do you make of it?
It does sound like a lot of these Democrats are trying to put their flag in the ground in terms of where they stand on this war early, in part because they realize that people are going to be voting based on their foreign policy record and their response to how President Trump carried out his own foreign policy. People remember in 2008 how Barack Obama, who then was a senator, talked about the war in Iraq, and his vote, he didn't have a vote, but his public commentary against going into Iraq, and when it turned into this quagmire and everyone started to turn against it, he could point back to his early statements. So I do think a number of these Democrats want to be able to point back to what they said in the early days of the war. If we are still talking about this war 6 months from now, or when the 2028 primary begins in earnest early next year, they'll be able to point back to some of these statements. But it is risky if this war fades from the headlines, or if it turns out to be a situation where they want to show that they are in support of the troops. It may be difficult for them to point back to any statements showing that kind of support if they're very negatively against the war this early on.
It does beg the question, Congressman. We sort of think we know what the issue set is going to be in any given election, and often, I mean, if you look at this war with Iran, definitely did not have to be on the list of potential top issues in the midterm elections.
No, it could be about rebuilding Cuba. That could be the defining issue of 28 for all we know. The turn of this news cycle is so fast now. It is so fast You can't really predict where things are going to be by September, October, much less where we are 2.5 years from now.
Yeah, the possible exception to that is just that everything is so expensive, and that fundamental reality seems to have defined our politics
Yes.
For quite some time and will continue.